Welcome to a special edition of Race for the White House, your cable stop for the fast pace, the smart take, and every point of view in the room. Tonight, you have seen the Obama college tour on Hardball. Now, the analysis. The panel will weigh in on the highlights from Senator Obama. Later, Chris will give his take one-on-one, and later the big questions, including, is anyone jumping on the Clinton bandwagon? First, the panel that comes to play, and with us tonight, we will have Rachel Maddow from the Rachel Maddow Show on Air America coming up. Washington Post columnist Eugene Robinson, both MSNBC political analysts, NBC News political director Chuck Todd, and columnist for the Washington Times, Tony Blankley. We begin here tonight, as we do each night, with everyone's take on the most important political story of the day. It is the headline. Tonight, our headline, Obama Unplugged. Quick take from around the panel before we get to some of the highlights. Eugene, you're up first.
Obama didn't break any spectacular new ground. I thought it was interesting. He was speaking before an audience, clearly anti-war. He spent a lot of time on the war, distinguishing himself not only from John McCain but also from Hillary Clinton. He knew, I think, he was in friendly confines for making the war an issue.
All right, we'll go around the horn pretty quickly. Tony, your first take.
Yeah, it was an ingratiating performance. I think he gave some issues that opponents may pick on. His discussion of merit pay was pretty much the straight union position. I think that may or may not be a little bit different from where he's been in the past. His saying that he didn't believe in racial stereotypes brings up the question of when he used the typical white person description of his grandmother. And I think his discussion of Reverend Wright will be interesting to review in detail.
And we're going to get into some of that. Chuck, your first take on what you heard.
Just simply reactive. I mean, he was almost marking time, wanting to make sure that he made it as much as he could more infomercial than a news. That he didn't want to make news, so he was doing his best to just be himself and let people bask in the charisma.
Yeah, we're going to get to some of these highlights. Rachel, quick take on what you heard.
I think I agree with Chuck. I think this was very much about him showcasing his personality. This was about Barack Obama showing off what he's like in terms of his ability to be funny and conversational and relaxed. This was very much about his charisma, much less than his policies. All
right, as we play the highlights now from some of the interview with Senator Obama on Hardball, we get into one of the big, most controversial issues, and that is his former pastor, Reverend Wright. Chris Matthews beginning a pretty contentious, or at least a challenging line of questioning. Listen.
Why didn't you walk out of that church? Why, when you heard that, when you called controversial language, why did you go back and give him $27,000 in contributions to your church? Why didn't you just say, he's on a different side of this fight than I am?
No, but because I think that what's happened is we took a loop out of and compressed the most offensive things that a pastor said over the course of 30 years and just ran it over and over and over again. Now, there's that other 30 years. I never heard him say those things that were in those clips.
Yeah. But you did say you heard him say controversial things.
Well, but I hear you say controversial things.
Tony, what do you make of it?
Look, I think he continues to have problems every time he talks about that. When he calls the Reverend Wright a good man, this is a man who said, "Goddamned America, KKK, USA," all the rest, racist rants. A lot of people are going to think that's not a good man. Whatever good works he may have done otherwise, soup kitchens, aid, those statements debar him from that. Also, he continues to be evasive on what he did or didn't hear. Now he says he never heard any of the controversial statements that have been in the loop, that have been reported. That's the first time I've heard him actually make that much of a denial.
Chuck, the reality is, as a political matter, he is sticking to the ground of saying there is more context to Reverend Wright than meets the eye in this loop that's played on cable and the radio and elsewhere. Is that a politically tenable position to stick to?
Look, he made the decision to not throw this guy under the bus. And no matter how much, my guess is that he's getting advice saying, why don't you throw this guy? I mean, that was almost what the premise of Chris's question, which was, why didn't you just throw this guy under the bus? Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you get out? He's not doing it. He drew that line, and he's going to defend it. Is it a political problem in some places? Mm-hmm. Yes, period. It's going to be, but clearly, as polling has shown, it doesn't make them unelectable. It's going to just make them less electable.
One of the students at West Chester University also asked Senator Obama directly about Reverend Wright. Let's watch that.
flap in terms of my former pastor, and that was a difficult moment. This is somebody who, on the one hand, is a good man, but said some things that I deeply disagree with. My belief is that one of the important things about my Christian faith is that you forgive people, you try to understand them, and ultimately, judge is going to be God is going to be somebody who's making judgments about many of these things. So I'm just going to stay focused on the job that I'm doing, and hopefully you'll pray for me.
Eugene, there was some conversation all along here that there might be a take two from Obama, that he felt he would have to respond to Reverend Wright in a new way, try to explain it a little bit better than he did in his speech. It sounds like he's not going to do that. He's looked at the polling, he's looked at a couple of weeks out and thought, I'm doing okay on this.
Well, he probably does believe he's doing okay on this. He could be doing better if he decided to throw Reverend Wright under the bus. But I think his defense is, at least from his point of view, truth. I don't know Reverend Wright. I don't know if he is a good man, but I know he is a man who has a very prominent clergyman in Chicago who has run a very successful church that does a lot of good works. He's prominent in political circles. He's been invited to the White House. He's not some exotic fringe figure. This is a mainstream pastor in Chicago and a man who's been important to Obama spiritually. And I really don't think he has any intention of throwing him under that metaphorical bus.
Gene, I would also just add that he doesn't have much of a political choice here. I mean, the political reality for Barack Obama with the Jeremiah Wright story is that he would still be getting hit with the Jeremiah Wright story, even if he dragged Jeremiah Wright out into the public square and drew and quartered him. I mean, there's nothing that he can do more. I mean, in terms of people talk about throwing him under the bus. Well, you know what? The fact remains that he was Barack Obama's pastor after some of those comments were made. Obama has denounced those specific controversial comments in incredibly certain terms. He can't denounce those any more angrily than he already has, any more thoroughly than he already has. He's just saying, I'm not personally going to kill this guy. I'm not personally going to beat this guy in front of a crowd.
No, but I don't know that he's really done that, Rachel. I think what he has said is there's a context to understand, and that maybe there are things that I found objectionable, maybe there were things that I found that were beyond the pale, but I wasn't going to abandon the church. It was more complicated than just disagreeing with him as to whether I stayed in the church. He did have a political choice. He could have decided, this is not for me. I can't be associated with something like this, no matter how strongly I feel about him in other areas. This is something I simply can't associate myself with.
But he's still faced with the fact that he did stay in the church after those things had been said. So the only thing he could do, and it would be an awkward political two-step to do it, would be to plead ignorance about things that Jeremiah Wright had said. And he's only pleading ignorance about the things that have been in that clip. He's otherwise saying, listen, the stuff in that clip, I absolutely distance myself from that. But the rest of him, the Jeremiah Wright that I know and how important he's been to me, I stand by the guy. I don't see that he has very many other options about ways to thread this needle.